Hi ADHD friends, ready to become Gutsy Cooks? Let's start now.
Hi Gutsy Cooks, today we're going to make pumpkin roll. Now, for those of you who like 5-ingredient meals and that's it, this is not the recipe for you. If you love a challenge and you're a baker and I love to bake and I love to cook, this recipe is for you. There are lots of ingredients, lots of equipment, and I give you detailed instruction on how to make a cake roll that won't split apart. Let's get started. Gather your equipment, your ingredients, and yourself. If you've watched other of my videos, you will see this equipment and ingredients slide this time is huge. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not doable. You can choose to make it easy, just follow the check marks and follow the steps. I typically read this out loud for our visually impaired friends. You can let it run and pause it at the end, or you can go ahead and get your equipment and ingredients and just pause the slide now. Take your time. You probably have all of this equipment and most of these ingredients in your pantry, especially if you followed Pantry Magic. So I'm going to get started here. You're going to need a baking sheet with edges, 15 by 10. The size is very important, so make sure it is the correct size. You're going to need parchment paper, little bowls, measuring cups, measuring spoons, a can opener, a small mixing bowl, a whisk, a medium mixing bowl, an electric hand mixer, nonstick spatula, and a clean dish towel or cheesecloth, and a wire rack, and also some plastic wrap. For ingredients, you're going to need vegetable shortening, flour for the pan, 3 eggs, 1 cup of sugar, 2/3 cup of pumpkin puree. This is not the whole can of pumpkin puree, only 2/3 of a cup. You're going to need 2/3 cup of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, then powdered sugar to sprinkle on the towel or cheesecloth, 1 8-ounce package of cream cheese, 1 cup of powdered sugar, and 8 tablespoons of butter. Okay, those are all of the equipment and ingredients. Just take your time. This recipe does take time, but it is so worth it in the end. It's absolutely delicious. Get ready. First, you're going to preheat the oven to 375. So here first, I'm greasing the bottom of the baking pan. And as you can see, this is not a perfect baking pan. This has been used several times before. Real life, right here. Then you're going to take your parchment paper, which is bigger than your pan. You want overlap. That's going to be important later. You're just going to stick it on there. Then go ahead and grease the paper. This will seem odd, but it is totally worth it. And it's really awkward, as you can see here. This is not Martha Stewart doing this. This is your head Gutsy cook, Heather. Okay, so once you get your paper greased, then you're gonna take a spoon, put some flour on it, shake it around, tip it over the sink, shake that extra flour off. After you're done preparing the pan, I want you to measure out the ingredients into little bowls, just like we usually do. Combine. Add the eggs and sugar to the medium mixing bowl and beat with the hand mixer, counting to 30. So you want the eggs and the sugar to be rather fluffy, so you are going to beat them on a high speed once you get it a little bit mixed. You can see the bubbles in there before I add the pumpkin puree. Remember, it's only 2/3 of a cup of pumpkin. It's not the whole can. Very important distinction between that and pumpkin pie. And then you're going to go ahead and mix this in, again counting to 30. So when you have just the wet ingredients together, you can go ahead and use your beater on high and add the air that the cake will need to make a nice fluffy cake, right? Once you start adding the dry ingredients, that's when you have to be careful about just stirring it in and not building the gluten in the flour up too much, because that is what will make your cakes or biscuits or anything else too hard. So before you put the flour in, you can beat it to your heart's content. After you put the flour in, you really are just stirring it together. Add the flour, baking powder, salt, and the spices, the cinnamon, ginger, and cloves. You're going to whisk that, counting to 30, because you want to make sure that baking powder and baking soda and salt, everything is really well combined in there. Nobody wants to bite into a piece of cake and get a bitter chunk of baking powder. Gross. So give that a good whisk, count to 30, make sure it's well combined. Now we're going to switch over to our wet mixture once again. This time you're only going to use the hand mixer on low or stir. And you're going to add your flour in a little bit at a time, pretty much in thirds. A little bit more. Here you can see I paused to go get a spatula because there was a lot of flour around the edge and you want to make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom of the bowl as well before you do your final stir. Once the batter looks like that, where it's kind of making a trail and holding a shape, it is stirred and ready to pour into the pan. Here's our pan from earlier that we got ready, and we're going to just pour the batter straight down the middle. The important thing about cake and getting it into the pan and spread evenly is you're going to work from the top. You want it to spread as much as it can by itself. Remember, it is coming in contact with that flour and shortening on the bottom, and you only get one shot at that. Once it's on there, that's where it's going to bake. If you try to use your spatula and move it around, and no, it's not going to work. Once the bottom layer has touched the flour and the grease underneath, that's how it's going to bake. So you want to work very gently from the top and the middle, and you want to spread it out as evenly as you can. Heat. Place your pan in the oven for 12 minutes and set your timer or 2 timers. If the cake is still making loud hissing noises after 12 minutes, or you touch it and your fingerprint stays in it and doesn't bounce back, it's not ready. Set a timer for 2 more minutes. Once you check it the next time, it should be ready. It should have quieted down, as well as it should bounce back and not keep your fingerprint. While the cake is in the oven, I want you to take your kitchen towel or your piece of cheesecloth and sprinkle it with powdered sugar. Don't be shy with the powdered sugar, because that powdered sugar is the only thing keeping your cake from sticking to the towel. So just go right to town on it. It's not going to dry your cake out or anything else, but be sure to put plenty of powdered sugar on the towel or the piece of cheesecloth. Finish and serve. So here we have our towel, and look, see, I'm holding the cake with the parchment paper, and I'm like, oh, should I do it on the long edge or the short edge? Oh, just do it. Okay, so I panicked and I flipped the cake. Luckily, it made it onto the cheesecloth. I will say you do have to have a little courage, whether you do it the long way or the short way. Just flip it, and if it stays together, that's a win. Gently but firmly roll up your cake, and then you're going to put it on your wire rack. You are going to allow that to cool on your wire rack for 1 hour at a minimum. Next is making the cream cheese filling. Take your clean mixing bowl and your hand mixer with the beaters reattached, and place the cream cheese and the butter in the mixing bowl, and you're going to beat those, counting to 30. Once your butter and your cream cheese are well combined, start adding your powdered sugar. You can sift it if you want to. I don't really find a reason to do it, but use your own judgment. And you'll see I'll do this 3 or 4 times, adding a little bit of powdered sugar at a time. It gives the butter and the cream cheese a chance to absorb it, and you're less likely to have those chunks of powdered sugar in there. So beat that really well. As always, you know I'm a big fan of getting the spatula and getting all the crud off the sides, crud being cream cheese filling, sorry guys, and just to make sure everything's well incorporated. So do that once, and then give it another little beat with the with the hand mixer and you will be all set. That's what your cream cheese filling will look like. Once your cake roll has cooled for an hour, you're going to gently and slowly unfold it, okay? And that last little curl at the end, you're not going to just put that down flat. You're going to keep that curled over. And you can see I'm taking the cream cheese filling and I'm going to gently cradle that curl in my hand, and I'm going to put more filling in this first curl here than most of the rest of the cake. The reason is that curl needs the most support, and it's what the rest of the cake is based on from an engineering perspective. So once you get that curl filled, go ahead and put out the rest of your cream cheese filling onto the cake. And then you're going to work on spreading it evenly. So how you serve this is you cut slices of the roll. And you need to think about, if you leave one section of the roll, see how I'm kind of filling that in? I made it too thin, so I go back and fill it in again. If you leave one section of the roll without filling, then when somebody goes to eat their piece of the pumpkin roll, they're not going to have any icing right there. They're going to be like, hey, what happened here? So when you think you've run out of icing, once again, the nonstick spatula is a feature in this broadcast. Take your nonstick spatula and you're like, oh, I'm all out of icing. Nope. Go in and go to work on that bowl and you will be amazed how much comes out. Watch this. Look at that. That's like a whole, like a third of a cup of icing. And then you can finish off evenly spreading it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is not something they're going to see, but you want it to be even so that everybody gets icing in every slice. And bring it right out to the edges. Okay, then you're going to take that first little part there that we kept rolled up, and that's where we're going to roll from. And you're going to gently peel away the towel if it's sticking at all, which it is. Don't worry about the marks from the wire rack. You're going to see that that is not going to be an issue once everything is said and done. Now you're going to wrap it up and you're going to chill it for at least 1 to 2 hours. I recommend using plastic wrap. However, if you run out of plastic wrap, this is the way you do it with wax paper, which is why you always check your equipment first, which clearly I did not do. So I would suggest plastic wrap, but in a pinch, you can wrap it up with wax paper before you put it in the refrigerator. You don't want to put it in the refrigerator uncovered or it will dry out. So, fair warning. And there it is, the finished pumpkin roll. Remember we had those lines from the wire rack? Well, here you don't see them anymore, do you? I took a sieve and I sprinkled the powdered sugar over top of it, which is the serving suggestion, to make it pretty. A lot of times we do this in fall, so it's kind of like snow covered because it's a pumpkin treat. But thankfully we have pumpkin year round now, so you can make this anytime you want. It also covers up any of those lines or teeny tiny little cracks or anything that might happen. You're going to slice this starting from the small end, and you can see here, this is how it looks on the plate when you're finished. Very nice. Usually you do about a 1 to 1.5 inch slice. It will make 8 to 12 servings depending on how thick or thin you cut the slices. I will say in recording this, I already had my one slice and it was delicious. I highly recommend this. Now, some keys to making a Swiss cake roll other than pumpkin. You want to make sure that you are using a recipe that has eggs, specifically egg yolks, and you want to make sure you're using a recipe that is a wetter recipe. This probably will not be successful with a typical cake mix. This will also not be successful with a dry chocolate mix, like a German chocolate cake. You need something that either has more egg yolks than usual or calls for instant pudding or something like that. So you want a wetter cake mix, and you want to make sure that you're only filling the pan just to the edge, because if the cake is too thick or it rises too much, it will crack, and that's where you'll run into problems. All right, I hope you give this a try. I know this is a lot of ingredients, a lot of equipment. It can be a little overwhelming, but if you go slowly and you follow the steps, my ADHD friends, it's so worth it. A lot of us avoid sugar most of the time. If you're going to step out, this one would be worth it. All right, take care. Now go get gutsy.
If you like this recipe, please subscribe. Thank you for your time and attention. Now go get gutsy.